Good evening. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Rother District Council Licensing and General Purposes Committee. The first item is to confirm the minutes of the last meeting. Are they accepted? Opposed, seconded, all in favour? Yes. Last, I shall therefore sign those. When I get a pen which works. Thank you, Louise. The second item, apologies and substitutes. Louise?
Apologies received from Councillors Curtis and Hacking.
And I see that Councillor Brown is attending remotely. He can speak, but not vote, as I understand. Are there any additional items? None. Are there any disclosures of interest, prejudicial or personal matters? No? Thank you. The surveillance policy and annual report has been circulated. This seems to be a routine matter that the report has to be made and we have to consider it. Are we prepared to note this, or does anyone wish to say anything about it? No? No? And Malcolm, do you wish to introduce the report?
Chairman, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. A very short report. It just tells you that we haven't carried out any legally approved surveillance operations. I would stress neither have we carried out any illegal surveillance operations. In fact, the last time we used the powers were back in, I think it's 2015, but we are required to report to members each year just to say whether we have or haven't. So there have been no use of covert surveillance in the past year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Does anyone else wish to say anything? No. In which case we simply note the report. We do need a proposer and seconder. Proposed and seconded. So Councillor Coleman, Councillor Thomas. Thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? That is noted. Right. Next item 6, fees and charges. Richard Parker Harding, would you wish to introduce your report?
Thank you, Chairman. This is our annual report recommending increases in general licensing fees and charges. We are recommending a general increase of 10% to cover increased administrative costs. We are allowed to charge fees which cover the administration of issuing licences and ensuring compliance with conditions. Appendix A sets out the proposed increases. The only matter I would refer members to is the licensing fee for the hiring of horses. The issue with the licensee for hiring of horses is that we have to employ a vet to inspect the horses. We have great deal of difficulty in employing a vet to do this work, and for that reason the fees which the vet charges increases every year, and therefore it's very important that we increase the fees in this particular area to ensure we don't actually make a loss on issuing the licence. That's been introduction, Chairman.
Thank you. Does any councillor wish to ask questions or speak? Councillor Timpley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, Richard, I should have sent you a note about this. In the ones that you're not putting up, there's the breeding of dogs. How many breeders do we have in the district? Do you know?
We have 5 or 6 breeders in the district.
Are they regularly inspected?
Well, the breeding of dogs, as in all the animal welfare licensing, is inspected on a risk rating. So they're either inspected, so they're issued with a star rating from 1 to 5. If they're only issued with a 1 star, that means they're inspected every year. But if they have a 5-star rating, then they're inspected every 3 years. And that's reflected in the fees. So if a premises has a 5-star rating, it's only inspected every 3 years, and they only have to pay the fee every 3 years. So there's a big incentive for the animal welfare licence owners to improve their standards year on year.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other queries? I think Councillor Errington, did you have a question?
I did, thank you, but Richard's answered it.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, no one wishes to speak? No? In which case, those in favour of the resolution? Oh, proposer and seconder. Yes, Councillor Madeley and, well, I'll take Councillor Coleman. Right, those in favour? Oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, another one, Richard. The skin and body piercing, and it says if they've been registered with another local authority, then a discount. Do we check that when they were registered that they were okay? I mean, just seems a bit odd, really.
Yes, if the person has been registered with another authority, then also we would check with that authority that they achieve the satisfactory standard. So that we just obviously, otherwise, because all you have is a number of these practitioners who go from premises to premises, and they're required to be licensed in each authority they practice in. But it would seem a bit unfair to make them pay the full fee just because they move between Hastings and Rotherham, and Hastings and Rotherham Wealdon.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? In which case we have a proposer and seconder. So those in favour? And anyone against? Abstentions? I think that was unanimous, in fact. Yes. Thank you. That's carried. We move on to agenda item number 7, Hackney Carriage Fares. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. This report recommends an increasing the maximum Hackney carriage fares from April 2023. Members agreed to carry out a consultation in December, which was carried out. This followed an increase last year, in May 2022, an increase of 10% of the maximum Hackney carriage fares. But I would advise members that we didn't actually increase fares before that from December 2016. So there was a long period where we didn't actually increase the Hackney carriage fares. Again, I'd emphasise that these are the maximum fares that a Hackney carriage driver can charge. The driver can charge less than this. The fares only, obviously Hackney carriages as opposed to private hire vehicles, can operate from taxi ranks, and they can be hailed. But that's quite unusual in this district. The other point to make is the fares only apply to journeys which start and finish within the district. So a 10% increase in fares is recommended, and I'm also recommending simplifying the fare card, which is, to my mind, quite complex at the moment, by reducing some of the higher tariffs which we currently allow from 10:30 to 1 o'clock in the morning, and from 1 o'clock in the morning to 5:30, and from 5:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the morning. That would then mean we'd only have 2 tariffs on a normal day, 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock and 11 o'clock to 6 o'clock. We're also recommending that we increase the fares which apply on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve to encourage drivers to work at this time, and finally an increase in the additional charge, additional person charge from 20p to 30p. Representations have been received from the licensed drivers. We've had 4 who have objected to the fare increase, 4 who support the fare increase, and 3 who supported the fare increase but not the simplified tariffs. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Timpey.
Yeah, thank you. As regard the representations, how many drivers do we actually have licensed? I mean, that seems an awfully small response from the number that we possibly have.
Yes, it was a 7% response. So it was a low response.
How many are there generally?
You're trying to test my maths. We normally have around about 170 drivers.
So when we consulted before, like last year or whenever, did we get about the same percentage, or is this
slightly less?
Is it usual?
It was slightly less last year. I think it was 5% last year.
It doesn't seem to be of interest to the drivers then, basically.
You would think it would be of great importance to the drivers what maximum fares they can charge. We do know, in addition to the statutory advertising in the local paper, we do actually email all the drivers with information.
As according to my maths, it comes out at just over 100 drivers on the figures we've been given. Councillor Madeley.
Excuse me, thank you, Chair. Whilst I appreciate very sensibly we agreed last year that having had how many years without an increase at all, we then suggested that there should be an increment each year, which I totally appreciate. But when we said that a year ago, we weren't in this financial situation. I really think that we ought to be reducing the 10% to something nearer 5. Unless anybody else can be braver than me. I just think that this is such an exceptional year, and it's going to be worse. I totally appreciate the driver's point of view, but they could lose quite a few fares if it does go up to 10%, because I'm sure sensibly they're going to increase it to that, nearly to that rate anyway, aren't they? Thank you.
I would only comment that obviously these are maximum fares, and that the drivers can charge less. If members wish to consider a 5% increase, then we would have to go out to consultation again, because obviously we will be changing what we said we were proposing.
Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think if it is because it's a maximum, I think it's better to give taxi drivers that ability to raise their fares if they feel that that's necessary to sustain their business. If they're not, if they're struggling to pay for the fuel and everything else that the cost of living brings. The other thing I wanted to say was in terms of the consultation. I mean, I know 7% is low, and it's dangerous to guess what the other sort of 93% of people think in any sort of consultation. But generally, I think it's fair to say that most consultation responses tend to be from people who either have something that they have a problem with the item, or they really, really support the item, or they have a strong feeling about it. But I wanted to know, Richard, if you sort of picked up anything outside of our consultation responses about sort of the mood of drivers around these sort of changes?
I think that the difficulty we always have is that there's a difference between Hackney carriage drivers who operate in Bexhill and the rural drivers, because obviously the drivers who operate in Bexhill obviously do shorter journeys, and therefore it's more important to them that the flagfall rate is higher than the drivers in the rural areas, where they also do high mileages, and therefore it's the mileage rate which is important. So we're always trying to achieve a compromise. Again, I think my general view from the trade is that there's very much mixed feelings, which are reflected in the consultation. Obviously, drivers are concerned about losing custom if they increase their fares too much, but then other drivers are saying, well, cost of living has gone up and fuel has gone up, and they need to increase their income as well. So it's very difficult to. There are divided opinions.
Councillor Field first, and then Councillor Courtell.
Thank you. I'm slightly confused here. And it's the concept of they can charge the maximum. Does that mean they don't have to? And if they're charging different fares, can the person wanting the taxi just shop around until they find one who's charging a fare that they want? It seems most bizarre to me, because I've just got in a taxi normally and paid what they've asked for.
Yes, obviously the whole concept really of setting Hackney carriage fares is that when you pick up go and use a taxi of a rank, they're going to charge you the same. But these are maximum fares, so it can be that any driver at the end of the journey can reduce the fare or can agree a lower fare at the beginning of the journey.
Is that not a bit of a departure from the way that taxis normally operate? Because surely you just pay what's on the meter.
Most of the time people pay what's on the meter, but so the driver does always have the discretion to charge less.
Do I have the discretion to haggle?
No.
Ah.
No.
Councillor Courtell.
I have a concern about the night fares between 1 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. At the moment, the fare is £5.80 for the first 152 yards, which is coming down to £4.80. That's a drop of almost 20%. And then for further miles after that, for additional numbers of 152 yards, it's coming down by 25% from 40p for that distance to 30p. These are quite large drops for night driving. If we want to encourage antisocial hours to be worked, then I do feel that it's only fair that taxi drivers do not have a cut for the sake of conformity. You can find these details on page 18.
Yes, the proposal is that the fares which apply during the early hours of the morning are reduced. I think in practice these fares are never actually implemented because most people who would use a taxi at that time in the morning would generally use a private hire vehicle and negotiate the price with the taxi driver. Of course, these fares don't apply to private hire vehicles. So, yes, you're right that we are proposing a reduction. It's anyway, really, I can see how we can try and simplify the fare card, which I think at the moment is complex for the public. But I think in practice, these fares are never applied anyway.
Thank you. Of course, I'm not quite sure of the night habits of people in the district, whether they would be coming out of clubs late at night and going to taxi ranks. I simply don't know.
No, we don't have.
We think not. And Councillor Timpey.
Yeah. Going back to the Appendix A, which I've just lost, but there we go. I mean, there is a difference. You've tried to offset the fact that you're losing a tier by reducing the yardage, haven't you? Because you've gone from 152 yards to 138, and then so that does offset slightly, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't totally, but it does.
Yes, overall, yes, it's obviously that because the fares are during the day are being increased, then the fact that we were doing away with the early morning fares is less of an impact. But it is obviously it is a reduction.
I think councillors realise this. It's in the report about the changing of the yards, so that we end up with fares which come out in round figures. That's why the adjustment to the yardage is made. It has to be done that way. Councillor Gordon.
So I notice it's 138.1 yard, Chairman.
Had enough mathematics for one evening.
I think the. I must say I'm confused, like Councillor Field, actually, about the max fares, because never have I jumped into a Rother taxi and not paid less than the metered fare. So when I jump on a train and get picked up at Rice Station, I just get on a Rother taxi and that's the fare I pay. So. Yeah, interesting.
Well, the only comment to make is we set maximum fares. If at the end of the journey the driver chooses to charge you less, then he's entitled to do so. It's just goodwill on behalf of the driver.
I think it gives them a flexibility, doesn't it? You know, going back to Councillor Madeley's point, they don't feel like if they want to charge the maximum fare, they can. If they don't have to. I can't see what the confusion is, really.
I am confused because no two drivers are the same. So you could have one on a ramp charging maximum and one charging less. And how is the person getting in the taxi supposed to understand which rate they're going to be paying when they get home or where they're going? That's what's confusing me. I thought it was uniform. This is a whole new concept.
It's never been. It's always been this. It's always been a maximum.
I think we're probably coming to the view, Richard, that probably the reality of the situation is that people pay what's on the meter, and it would be rather unusual for a taxi driver to charge less. It seems a little impractical.
Obviously, what can happen, which obviously with technology now is quite easy, is that you can have a situation where a meter can actually hold two fares, tariffs, so they can have the Rother maximum and their own fare, which as long as it's less than the Rother maximum, they can do that.
Yes, although I can understand that, we still have the point that how does the passenger know that one taxi is going to be cheaper than the other?
Well, only after experience of using different taxi companies.
Councillor Gordon first, and then Paul Cottrell, I've noticed.
Well, I think if it's a max fare of 10%, I would agree with the max fare increasing by 10%. So I propose that.
So are you making a...
yeah.
You're proposing
I propose a
a
10% rise
Do we have a seconder for that? A seconder from Councillor Thomas. We've got two more speakers, perhaps, before we go to a vote. Councillor Cortell first, and then Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I would also support the 10%, I feel it's wrong that the night fares should be reduced by such a substantial amount. And I feel that the current structure for the night fares is right. I mean, the reduction from 152 yards to 138 yards doesn't take account of a walloping reduction of 25% from 40p to 30p. I think it's intrinsically wrong to be penalising taxi drivers who are willing to come out in the middle of the night. I hope that Councillor Gordon would consider adding change to his motion to include the current structure of fares rather than going for this simplified structure. Thank you.
Well, Richard, we have a proposal on the table, but the question there is if councillors did want to fix a different timing or rate for overnight, it would have to go back to consultation, presumably.
If members wanted to keep the early morning fare as it is, then they could agree that. So not increasing it, but just keeping it as it is, then that would require consultation because we're not changing anything. What we're changing is that retaining the early morning fares
And the timing.
and the timings. I mean, it does make the fare card complex. And I would point out, I think these fares are rarely, if ever, used because most people would use a private hire vehicle if they're travelling at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, we may be straining over on that. I had said that Councillor Coleman could speak.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to say something else about the previous issue we were debating, but I won't now. That seems to have passed. But I think just on this, I'm more minded in favour of Mr. Parker Harding's report as is. I think simplification is always good. I think in local government we have a tendency to overcomplicate things, and I think it's easier for both consumers and drivers to understand the simpler fare system. And also, if anything, the reduction in night fares brings it much closer to what the private hire vehicles are charging locally for those sorts of journeys, which may even increase someone's likelihood of, if they were to find a taxi waiting in a taxi bay, which I don't think they would do at 1 o'clock in the morning, to hop in that taxi instead of calling 24/7 or one of the other private hire companies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, you wish to speak?
Very straightforwardly. I mean, if taxi drivers are faced with a 24% increase in fuel, that would eat into their profits absolutely massively. And that's a good argument for 10% rather than 5%. And I think I entirely agree with Councillor Coleman. It would have to be very foolish if you were trying to depend upon hailing a taxi at 1 o'clock in the morning. You're going to book somewhere, so it's irrelevant.
I think we're coming towards the end, but we have first Councillor Gordon, then Councillor Timpey.
Yes, I agree that we should have the simplified fare card. I think it's a good idea, yes.
Councillor Timpey.
Yeah, I was just going to say where the resolution is, are we going for table 1 or table 2? And table 2 is really what we're talking about, and that's what we should be voting on.
Yes, that's right. So I think then we can move to a vote. We have a proposer and seconder. Those in favour of the recommendation as made? Those against? 1, one, I think. Any abstentions? None. Thank you, that's carried. Agenda item number 8, Hackney carriage and private hire fees. There's an amendment here. I hope you all have a copy. An amendment to the proposed resolution that the Council commence a consultation on increasing operator and vehicle licence fees, and if there are no objections received, fees are increased from the 1st of April 2023. And the second limb of that is that the driver licence fees are increased from the 1st of April 2023. So there's a consultation on one part and an actual proposed increase on the second. Slight mistyping of the original papers. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. As a local authority, as a licensing authority, we are required to consult before increasing operator and vehicle licence fees. We're not required to consult on increasing driver fees. In Table C, I've set out the proposed increases in fees and the percentage increases which is applicable. We haven't actually increased operator and vehicle licence fees since 2011. This is for a number of reasons. You will recall that we became a shared environmental health and licensing service in 2012, and that resulted in a reduction in costs, which meant we didn't have to increase the driver fees. At the same time, we were trying to make the Rother and the Wilden fees equitable, and we had to then move to increase the Wilden fees so that we're now in a position after a decade of the fees being the same. We should have increased our operating vehicle fees a few years ago, but because of the pandemic, the finances of income against expenditure became quite confused. We did have a drop in the number of drivers and licences which were being issued because obviously some drivers took the opportunity to retire, and therefore the actual financial position became quite difficult to look at. So there has been a delay in this proposal to increase our fees. What we have done is to look at each type of fee and to estimate the time it takes to issue each type of fee and the costs involved in enforcement of each type of licence. And we then estimated the time involved and came forward with the proposals for increasing all the fees next year. You'll see in paragraph 7 the current financial position, and you'll see that this year we estimate a deficit in the budget of just over £57,000, and it's always been the policy of the council to try and have a break-even position with regard to expenditure on taxi licensing and income on taxi licensing. That's quite hard to achieve because obviously factors change every year. But we now have got out of kilter really between the fee income and our expenditure. And you'll see that even with the increases which are being proposed, which obviously some are quite high percentages, that we will still have a predicted deficit in the budget of next year of £51,000, which will be coming back next year with several proposals to increase the fees. So we can increase the driver fees without consultation, but we do need to consult before we increase the operator and vehicle licence fees. So If there are any objections, and I anticipate some objections, then the matter will then come back to this committee for determination.
Thank you. Does any councillor wish to ask questions or to speak? No? No? Do we have a proposer and seconder? Proposed by Councillor Timpey, seconded by Councillor Thomas. Those in favour? Those against? Not quite sure, Councillor Field, which way? Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were for or against.
Against.
So
I go so far as to say I was for, but I'm not against.
I hope Louise can note that. And I think there's no abstention. So thank you all very much. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, and I think that concludes our business. Thank you all. It is now about 7 minutes past 7.